See him a beast when you hear that sound like yeah, beat on the beat when you hear that sound like woo. Yeah, bitch I'm a champ, only me one round like yeah, me, I'm a G bring heat in the sound like.
Joining me today, everybody, a little bit different. Usually we have fighters on the Scrap News, but a retired combat athlete, if you will, and also founder of MindLock Mental Training. Please welcome Dylan Nadler. Dylan, my man, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. How you doing?
Of course, dude. I'm doing pretty well. Messed up your name like 3 times. Did I get it right that time?
Perfect. Killed it.
Nailed it. Awesome. Love it. Early in the morning. Not really. It's 11:30 a.m. But anyways, Dylan, why don't you just tell me a little bit about MindLock Mental Training? As I said, a little bit different. Usually I have fighters on the show, and you are someone that advocates for fighters, helps athletes. So let me stop talking. Tell me what you guys do.
For sure. So at MindLock, we work with high performance athletes to develop the mental game, right? And what's that mean? And why does it even matter? Well, it's really looking at mental skills like a skill set the same way we look at the physical stuff, right? The cardio, the technique, the game planning, all of that stuff, the strength and conditioning. How do we take, the other side of that skill set, the mental game, and work on that too? Because when you look at competing, especially in combat sports, it's so mental, right? If you ask someone how much of competing is mental versus physical, everyone has their own opinion, but it's at least 50-50. Some people go all the way up to 90%, 99% mental. Even if you're just sticking at that kind of 50-50 mark, you have to ask yourself, well, what am I doing about that, right? If 100% or 90% of my training falls into that kind of physical category, what am I doing about the rest? And that's what we do. So we work with a lot of fighters, a lot of non-combat sports athletes, and really work on developing that mental skill set so that every time you walk in there and compete, you're able to perform to the best of your potential, which is at the end of the day, what we're really looking for every single time.
And I mean, being someone who wrestled growing up and trains some combat sports now, you're 100% right. The mental game is, in my opinion, like the biggest part of it, because no matter how in shape I am, no matter how shredded I am, no matter how much time I put in on the mats, on the bag, in sparring, if my mind's not there, my performance isn't going to be there. So I think that's an absolutely beautiful thing you're doing and a great thing that you're bringing attention to in the sport and making athletes realize, hey, there is more to this than just physical practice. So let me ask you a few more questions about yourself and where you're based out of, where MindLock. Just ask you, where are you guys based out of?
So I'm from Toronto, but I'm in Ottawa right now. Probably coming back to Toronto soon. But yeah, that's pretty much. I was born in Vancouver, so kind of the other side of the country.
Yeah.
But Toronto's going to be the home spot.
And then everything you guys do can be done remotely too, correct?
Yeah, so we work with athletes kind of online through video calls and Skype and FaceTime and stuff like that. Even honestly for local people, it's just usually easier for everybody, especially with people having busy schedules and being able to fit in a session on the go between training sessions while they travel. And we also work with a lot of international competitors. So, a lot within Canada and the US, but also out in Australia, out in Indonesia, out in Thailand. So, having that online component makes it really easy to connect with athletes that otherwise maybe would have had some more friction there, finding some work to get in.
That's like the one good thing COVID, the pandemic brought to this world is like the beauty of online working. Like, you're in Canada, I'm in Philadelphia, and we're talking no problem. And 3 years ago, that would have been a bigger obstacle than it is now.
Mhm.
So interesting there. But tell me a little bit about, like, for lack of better words, the services you guys offer. I'll ask you about like what a typical session looks like in a few minutes here. But before we get there, what does like MindLock offer? I know you guys are all about mental health and mental training, but what does that look like, so to speak?
Yeah, for sure. Good question. So, when an athlete comes on and they want to work with us, what it looks like is running sessions either kind of weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. A session lasts typically 45 minutes to an hour, depending on what we're working on. It's very personalized, so everyone gets kind of a different experience, and there's no like cookie cutter model everybody gets pushed through. And depending on kind of that frequency that they're looking for, like I said, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, getting sessions in there. And what's cool too is it's very flexible. So as a fighter, you might be in camp or out of camp or taking a break, and it molds to that. So what a lot of athletes do is they'll say something like, you know what, let's start working bi-weekly, and then every 2 weeks, let's kind of run that session. But 4 weeks away from the fight, let's kind of turn up that heat a little bit and do it once a week. And then when the fight's over, let's go back to maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month. So it's very much so bends and molds to the schedule of the athlete, and there's no kind of just set in stone thing that we follow. So that's kind of the structure of how it works. We do a lot of things because it's online. It's helpful too. Everything gets sent out to the athlete. So if we're going through an exercise or an activity or an assessment or anything like that, everything gets emailed out right away. So you don't have to worry about writing things down or keeping notes or memorizing anything. Very easy because it all just gets sent to you directly. So you always have access to kind of what we're going through as well, which is helpful.
And then, like I just mentioned, I don't need you to walk me through an hour-long session verbatim, but kind of what kind of things do you do to help people train their mind? Like what does a session look like, kind of?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So my approach, I like to call it kind of like a high structure, high flexibility model, where high structure in terms of there's always something that we can be working on in terms of kind of this curriculum, if you will, and different pillars and skills to build up. And at the same time, having the flexibility to deviate from that and get into more kind of day-to-day stuff. Like, okay, we worked on something last week. You had the week to apply it in training and in practice. How did that go? What felt great about it? What didn't feel so great about it? So leaving enough room to be able to kind of dig into that stuff. But in terms of the actual, meat of it, I like to take different mental skills and different pillars of mental skills. So some examples are things like goal setting, self-talk, imagery and visualization, identity stuff, motivation, taking stuff like that and breaking it down into tools that we can use. So whether that's done through a specific exercise or an activity and something that's tangible, right? Because it's one thing just to say, I feel more confident or I feel more motivated, but really taking that and turning it into something that you can add to your arsenal and apply the very next day in training is helpful as well. So that's kind of the approach. Is it's taking these bigger, broader, kind of more complex concepts and really turning them into tools that can be used right away to make an impact. And that's really the model that we follow, is trying to build things up piece by piece and giving the athlete enough space to be able to work on that and see how it feels.
And one, what got you into I know you do more than just MMA and combat sports in MindLock, but you also competed. So tell me a little bit about that, your past in combat sports, what brought you here, and then two, how did MindLock come about? Where did this idea come from?
So when I was 5, my parents put me in Taekwondo, like a lot of kind of parents do. And for me, I did that and just never stopped. And I realized very quickly that I had a passion for fighting and for sparring and for competing. And, where I was at, the club I was with, it was great in the sense of it was very traditional and it taught us kind of like those tenets of martial arts. But in terms of it being like a competitive school that teaches you how to go out there and really fight, it wasn't that type of place. So, I realized very quickly too, or maybe not so quickly, it took, years and years to realize I'm not in the right spot that I need to be. So, when I was 12, I think I ended up switching clubs to a more competitive gym where they actually, grew fighters. And that's where I kind of kicked things off from there. So I had a black belt at the time in Taekwondo, but my skill level was not even close to that of a black belt, honestly. And I had a lot of work to do in terms of not only just getting to where I wanted to be, but even just getting to where I should have been, right? I had a lot of teammates there, new teammates, people that were my age that were just kicking my ass all the time, right? So I'm like, if I'm not even as good as these teammates, how am I going to be like, a successful competitor? So step one was just trying to buy into the system, committing myself to that, training way more than I've ever trained before, and just going from there and starting to compete actually, which was cool. So within my first year of competing at that level, I became, Ontario provincial champion and then the national champion kind of within that same year, which was really cool. Because for me, my first week of when I joined that new club, all of those athletes were actually flying out for nationals that week. And that kind of blew my mind. I was like, no way. I was like, these people are getting on a plane together and they're like representing the province. Like it just blew my mind. And I was like, I want that. Like, yeah. I want to be able to do that. And it was cool kind of a year later to then be, provincial and national champion. And, if you extend out a few more years, I was able to, win nationals more times. I was named team captain of the Canadian national team, which was awesome. I was one of the first Canadians to win the US Open in back-to-back years, which is one of the most prestigious international events. So to win that once is a big deal, let alone back to back, which was really cool. And just travel and really, be able to go to all these different countries, from Korea to Taiwan to Mexico to Belgium to Netherlands, and just fight at the highest level every month. And, for me, it's not only did my physical skill set heighten at those periods and really peak in those times, but mentally as well, it demanded a lot, right? I was still kind of a younger kid dealing with normal things like high school and stuff like that, but still traveling and competing and fighting these kind of monsters too, right? Because any sort of tournament sport, there's no matchmaking, right? So, you could be a 15-year-old kid fighting, the Olympic champ from 6 months ago, and that's just how it goes. So managing those things. And I think the idea for MindLock was always in the back of my head, maybe not as specific as it became, and knowing exactly how I wanted it to go, but I've always been interested in the mental side of things, right? Like if you look at my 8th grade yearbook, even, where it says, what do you want to be when you grow up, in 20 years, when everybody else said actor, singer, whatever, mine said sports psychologist, which,
Wow.
I think indicates, at least at that point, where my head was at, and at least just having an interest in that space. And like I said before, I wasn't the most talented kid right away. And I was never the biggest or the strongest or the fastest. And I had to kind of claw my way up to where I wanted to be. And it took a lot of persistence. It took a lot of grit. It took a lot of toughness. And realizing that, a lot of the things that made me successful weren't just my physical skills, but my mental skills. And realizing that nobody else was really doing that and emphasizing those things, it kind of blew my mind too, right? Like being exposed to all these international programs and these national teams. Everyone has, a nutritionist. Everybody has a team doctor and a physiotherapist. But again, nobody had anything on the mental side. And for me, that being so crucial to my own success and my own performance, and not seeing that anywhere, I was like, okay, if this worked for me, it's for sure, or at least I thought it has to work for everybody else. As soon as I'm done competing, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So it was a pretty quick flip as soon as I stopped.
When you're talking to athletes you're working with, what's some of their reasoning for coming to you, for finding you? Like, what are these athletes seeking out?
Yeah. That's a good question too, because everybody's kind of different, right? I think the main misconception is that if you're seeking out some sort of mental coach or mental training, you have to have an issue, right?
Sure.
Yeah, of course, there's going to be people that have, low confidence or have these insecurities, or maybe took a tough loss, in their last match, and they want to be able to kind of get back to where they want to be. But on the flip side, there's a lot of people that don't really struggle with anything in particular and are just looking for that competitive advantage, right? Um, Good example is a client I work with who's become a close friend at this point, Ross Levine. He fights for Karate Combat. I don't know if you've heard of that, but he's the middleweight champion. And Ross is an example of somebody who's incredibly mentally tough. I mean, he's a multiple time world champion in karate. He went undefeated in glory kickboxing, and now he's undefeated in Karate Combat. He's the champion. He's the type of person that I think fits into that category of incredibly mentally tough, incredibly resilient, incredibly experienced, but always looking for that edge, right? So when people look at this and say, well, I don't have confidence issues, I don't really struggle with these things, I'm not an anxious person, maybe I don't need mental training, it's not just to fix a problem that you may have, it's to just extend the skill set that you already possess, right? It's the same way that these UFC champs still have their striking coaches, right? You look at someone like Izzy, great striker, he still shows up to class, right? He can't just say, well, I'm a great striker, I've had a great career, clearly I know how to kickbox, I don't need that stuff anymore. It's about just extending that, right? So I think when you come into this with, a high baseline of toughness, instead of being able to say, well, I don't know how much I can get out of it, you could argue there's more to get out of it, because with a foundation so strong, imagine what can come out of that when you train it and when you stretch that out. So the types of people that come to us, like I said, it kind of falls into those two camps of people with something specific that they know they're looking for, or people that just want that edge and have that competitive drive of being different than their opponent. And for both, it works great.
Yeah, it totally makes sense, dude. And like when people are finding you, what's the most common way they find you? Is it just by like referral, word of mouth? Do you reach out to people often? How do you like build your clientele list?
It's a lot of referral, word of mouth, a lot of Instagram stuff. I do a lot of DMs, so I'll be in there DMing fighters all the time, just trying to say what we're all about, educate people on it. I think, where we're at in terms of, the mental training kind of industry is there's a lot of question marks around it, right? It's not as straightforward as it should be, where, if I need a nutritionist, I kind of know what that looks like, and I just have to choose who I want. If I want to work on my strength and conditioning, I know what that industry is. I have to find someone that I like. The mental training side is different, where, a lot of people kind of understand what it is or are curious by what it is, but don't really know. So for me, I do a lot of kind of outreach and, a lot of DMing for people that do have those questions, and people that are like, well, I feel like that could help, but what is it? Right. So it's a lot of explaining, and, between the referrals, word of mouth, Instagram stuff, and reaching out, that's usually how things go down.
And then I don't know if you're able to share this. I don't know if there's any like doctor-patient confidentiality, but if you're able to name drop any clients you have, anyone that comes to you, or can you just give us some names of athletes?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, over the course of the last little bit, in terms of, UFC fighters, we've worked with fighters like Walt Harris, UFC heavyweight, Cody Stamen, bantamweight, Montana De La Rosa is in the UFC. This woman, Randy Field in Bellator, who's doing great. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there's a lot between UFC, Bellator, regional scene stuff, and then, like I said, non-combat sports too. So whether it's Olympians or NCAA football, yeah, I'm trying to think. There's actually, I can pull it up afterwards, but on the Instagram page, there's like a guide button, like it's one of the tabs, right? There's
Yeah.
like reels and tags and guides, and we actually have a list of a lot of the athletes that we've worked with in that guide section. So if you are curious and if I missed anybody, you can take a look there, because there's a lot more there too.
I mean, there's tons. You got like world champions and a lot of reputable athletes that come to you for help. So I think that is absolutely great that you're giving these top level performers the training they need, so to speak. Question, just because you brought up the first two names you said, Walt Harris and Cody Stamen. Obviously they both like suffered extreme tragedy a couple years ago. Just curious, did they come to you before that happened or after that happened?
So with Walt, it was prior.
Okay.
And with Cody, it was during. So we worked together for both fights. The first one was, I forget who the first one was with, and the second one was Brian Kelleher, that he fought kind of post, everything happening. So we had the chance to kind of build a really strong foundation, manage that, go into the Kelleher one, and then again follow up with that with the Fight Island fight. So it was kind of a series of a few that was an interesting one there too.
And the fighters and athletes in general, I don't need to keep saying fighters, athletes that come to you, since they started coming to you, do you notice an improvement in their record or performance overall?
Yeah, right away. And I think that that's another misconception too, is, if you're going to get into the space, don't let anybody tell you that it takes 6 months or a year to start to see benefits. I think that's kind of just lazy. I think especially in this space where the mental game is a little bit less tangible in terms of what you can see, right? If I can lift 100 pounds today and next month I can lift 125, I know I'm getting stronger, right? How do you know when you're getting more confident? How do you know when you're building up these skills? It's a little bit tougher, right? So I think some people kind of take advantage of that by extending things out. My whole philosophy is, listen, you'll be able to, if we do this the right way, as soon as we're done our first session, walk away from that feeling much better, like you've kind of gained this skill set, or you've gained a tool to add to your skill set that you can use right away. Of course, after months and after years, things just start to get stronger and more developed, and really start to get better. But at the same time, there's no reason why we can't make that instant impact that people are looking for. So of course, right away I'll get messages, and that's always my favorite, which is if I'm working with somebody for the first time, a few days later saying, hey, you know what, I just tried what we worked on in training, felt way better. I mean, this happened to me yesterday with a kid who plays hockey. He just messaged, we had our first session, and then that same day, he had a practice that night, and he's like, man, practice was way better. I felt, much more alert. I felt more on. I'm excited for this game coming up. So there's no reason why, instant impacts can't be made. Of course, over time it extends and it develops, but I'm really proud of the fact that what we do not only works, but it works now.
I think obviously sports psychology is a big thing in 2023. It's something we hear more about every day, but I have not stumbled across a lot of brands like MindLock. So as far as you're aware, are there other companies out there that do what you guys do? And if so, like, is there anyone you took some inspiration from?
Not really, and I think that it has its pros and cons. The con is that you're right. There's not a lot of places to draw inspiration from. There's not a lot of kind of trailblazers that you can follow and say, you know what, this is a great case study for how they did it. I want to do it, right? If I was a real estate agent, I could look up 1,000 successful real estate agents and say, what's their system, what's their story, and follow that. The pro is that, like you said, without there being a real kind of brand presence in this space, I feel like it's a cool opportunity to kind of be that person and to, I struggled with this when I first started, which was the concept of, man, it's so tough to breach into the space where not only do I have to kind of, make a name for myself, but I have to also educate people on what this even is, right? What is mental training? How does it work? And it used to frustrate me, right? Like, it's not fair. It's not fair that I'm doing this thing that I know works and everybody else kind of has an idea of it, but I have to do this extra work of convincing people. And what I did is I kind of reframed that mindset to, I'm grateful to be a new voice in this space and to become an authority in this space and to do this the right way where, we do become one of the dominant brands, right? So you're right, there's not a lot of brands. There's a lot of like a typical sports psychologist is typically a professor full time who consults with athletes on the side. I'm generalizing here. I'm sure there are plenty that aren't like this, but at least from the ones that I've seen and the experiences that I've had, full time professor, consult with athletes on the side, a ton of academic experience, which is great, but not a lot of sport experience, right? And if I'm a fighter and I want to talk to somebody about fighting, the bare minimum is that they've fought before, right? Because the thing is, it's like you can read every book that there is on, performance anxiety and pressure and game time stress. But until you've had to make that walk into the ring, with all those fans cheering and booing and the injury that's nagging that you have to take into this fight, how can you really resonate, right? And how can you expect the athlete that you're working with to trust you? So for me, I really lean into my personal sport experience, and I'm not afraid to share stories and talk about my experience too, and really kind of build that connection. So not only it's not just a one-sided relationship, it's very much so a give and take and a back and forth. And that's what I found too. So I'm excited to, not only just work with athletes and make an impact individually with them, but to build up a brand that becomes recognizable so that when you think of mental training, you think of MindLock.
And I think I mean, obviously it would be great if there were outlets like you guys everywhere because everybody in the world could benefit from something like this. But for now, it does help because you guys stand out, you're unique, and you can kind of be that trailblazer that you're wanting to seek yourself. And I think that is awesome, man. And I think that's part of the reason MindLock is so special and amazing. So 2023, we're about a month into the year. What are some of your goals for this year?
It's a good question. For me, it's just really continuing to do the right things every day. I think when it comes to goals, there's a few ways to set goals, and it's funny because this is what we do with our athletes too. It's not just about kind of that end goal, that big goal. And in an athlete's case, it might be I want to be a champion, or I want to win 4 fights, or whatever it is. And in my case, it might be I want to breach into this organization, or have this many clients, or whatever. It all stems from kind of the small stuff you do every day, right? So if I'm not doing my job throughout the day, there's no way I'm going to be able to get to whatever my bigger goals are, right? So for me, it's important to do things like being very accessible, to the clients I have, being able to put time into social media and, create videos and content and put stuff out that way, to be able to continue to look at the curriculum that we have and build on that and strengthen that. We have an online course as well, which is, fully automated, fully online. Athletes can go in there and do it, video lessons and case studies and activities, making sure that that's all up to date and stuff like that. So in terms of the short term, it's making sure that I'm doing my part every day to kind of keep this thing moving. And in terms of long-term stuff, I don't know, honestly. I think for me, it's really about just trying to be more accessible and be that voice to people that maybe haven't heard it yet. A lot of educational stuff around really getting people to understand what mental training is, how it helps, what we do, and obviously, trying to get as many champions as we can. I mean, this year, I think we have around 6 or 7 world champs that we crowned this year, whether it was in MMA or boxing. One of them is an athlete that we worked with, Johnny Eblin, Bellator, middleweight. He won the belt, which was really cool. Jazzy Parr from Australia, John Wayne Parr's daughter, she won a couple belts in boxing. We have a few Australians actually that won belts up there too, whether it was in Muay Thai or boxing. So really just the world champ thing is always really cool. That's always like a really good indication that things are going well. But I think, yeah, in the macro, as many champions as we can have, because it really does set the tone. But in the micro, making sure that those small things are being done every day, and making sure that anybody that needs something like this or is curious about something like this, has an opportunity to learn and to hear about it.
Ironically enough, I think my two hosts for my podcast, literally right now as we speak, are interviewing Johnny Eblin. So small world.
That's cool.
Yeah. Past 2023, I ask this question to fighters all the time, like your ultimate career goals. And it's different here because when a fighter's career ends, that's it, right? It doesn't live on. They have to figure out what's afterwards, whether it's training or coaching or commentating. But MindLock is a brand, it's an essence. So long after you're gone, MindLock can still exist and thrive. So I guess let me ask you, as the founder of the company, the founder of the brand, what are your like ultimate goals for this company? Where do you want to see this thing go in like 50 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want this to be the premier place that athletes go for mental training. I want it to be a, household name, especially for athletes. I want it to be something where as soon as you think mental training or mental skills, you think of MindLock. I want to be able to have different coaches with different specialties in different sports, right? So again, if you're a tennis player, to have somebody that specializes not only, with the background in mental training, but with tennis as well. So you can feel that same connection that I have with combat sports athletes, right? So being able to bring on a team with people that are not only, very good at what they do in terms of consulting, but have a good understanding of the sport that they work in, which is cool. And continue to just build things out and build out the brand, whether it's adding on, live clients that we have, bringing on more people to the online stuff, because like I said, that's also a cool part of it is being able to, bring athletes on to the online course that we have and have them go through the content and learn at their own pace and have access to these things on the go. So, I think 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's just making sure that this becomes the biggest thing out there, and it becomes something that's known not only for how many athletes we work with, but the impact that we make. Because at the end of the day, you could have a million clients, but if everybody only sticks around for 1 month and walks away, you're not doing something right. So for me, it matters more that we're doing right by these athletes, and that long after they're gone and they're retired and they're asked about how their experience was, that they have nothing but good things to say. And we keep a relationship there as well. So really just expanding in every way that we can. And I think that's an exciting, premise too.
Dylan, I hope I did a good job covering everything today. As I said, this is new for me, usually interviewing fighters, so I couldn't go off my usual template, had to kind of really dive deep and try to understand MindLock. So before we get out of here, if there's anything I missed, if there's anything else you want to say, now is your opportunity. The mic is yours.
Thanks, man. No, you killed it. You even showed up matching with the hat and the sweater.
That was an accident, but it works.
It works, man. No, you did great. I think, what, if you want to find me, Instagram's the best place. If you search up at MindLock with an underscore, tons of content there, whether it's, learning about different mental skills, whether it's keeping up to date with our athletes and who we work with and how the whole thing works. Send me a DM. There's a link there where you can check out our YouTube channel and our podcast that we host. Tons of content there, more than enough information to be able to get a good sense of who we are. And that's really the best place to do it. And like I said, even if you're just curious or have a couple questions about it, send me a message. I'm always checking that. Always happy to have some conversations back and forth with athletes and people that are passionate about what they do. So send me a message. I'm excited to have some back and forths.
Social media engagement is supporting. So people, go follow Dylan, go follow MindLock. I will link your social media handles below. And for real, man, I really appreciate you coming on and giving, I appreciate you allowing me to give you the spotlight to talk about something so important, because aside from fighting, the physical aspect, the mental aspect is huge. And even outside of fighting and outside of sports, mental health is one of the most important things on this planet. So for real, when I say this, I mean it. Thank you for putting a spotlight on that for people. It's very important.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, brother. No, I really appreciate it too. Great interview. Loved everything that you have going on, and I can't wait to see what we're able to do in the future too.
Awesome, man. Likewise.